breathe. Ready? Welcome, everyone. Aye, this is quite loud.
It's not that bad. Just don't lean in.
Okay. Tonight, we want to take the time to welcome everyone to our regional SCC, and we trust that you will really have a good time tonight. All right, welcome to our event hosted by our Pickering Involvement Committee. We are the co-chairs of PIC, and my name is Valerie Estridge. And this is?
My name is Tiffany Sherwood. Tonight, our focus is on raising healthy, happy children. We know that our parents, our SCC members, and school staff are key partners in supporting successful outcomes of all our children. We'll start our evening off with a land acknowledgement.
The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school boards and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, North America. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island, First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. We are pleased tonight to welcome our trustee Edwards, trustee Templeton, acting director Marsh, and our superintendent Macaulay. Will you please stand and wave your hand so we could recognize you? Thank you.
All school boards are required to have a parent involvement committee. The PIC provides information and advice to the school board on parent engagement. The PIC develops ways to help parents support their children's learning at home. The PIC shares and supports the work of school community councils. In the Durham District School Board, the PIC supports the Volunteer of Distinction, regional SCC events like tonight, and the annual Parents as Partners Symposium. We have also provided input on board initiatives and policies. We participate in subcommittees to deliver the outcomes of the engagement strategic plan.
Please help us to welcome some of our PIC members tonight. We have our parent representatives from Ajax. We have Jennifer McLaughlin. If you're here, please wave your hand. Rupal Patel. North, we have Robin Scubay. From Oshawa, Adriana Fajardo, Chadna, and Patricia Clark. From Whitby, we have Simon Kariuki, Margaret Ogonkoya, and from Pickering, we have Michelle Montgomery and Ted Foster. Our community representatives, we have Nigel Hunter, Fatima Sedat, and Maylene Brown. Can you wave your hands if you're here, please? All right. Thank you for coming.
We also have two trustee representatives on our committee, Scott Templeton and Donna Edwards. Our staff representatives are Derek Meerweather, Sarah Katab, Stephanie Spencer, Kavita Canavali, Michael Bowman, and Heather Mundy.
Awesome. All right. Tonight we have a very interesting agenda for you. We have an exciting agenda this evening. Stephanie Pelibore will be sharing the well-being strategic plan at 7:20. We ask that half of the audience with the blue will be on this side. Oh, we don't need to separate? Oh, I thought we were going to do half and half. All right, so we'll skip that. For the representation, okay, so we're going to have two different representation. Are we still doing that? One by Don Hogan and one by Stephanie. Promoting healthy habits, while Stephanie represents promoting mentally healthy communities in our schools community. Don't worry, after the break, we'll have a break. The speakers are going to switch. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
They're not switching. At 8:30, we'll also have a presentation by two of our SCCs, William Dunbar and Pierre Elliott Trudeau, on some exciting ways they have engaged their school community. We'll end the evening with some time to connect and provide feedback.
All right, at this time we will have Stephanie. Let's welcome Stephanie at this time. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's a Tuesday night. It is so good to be here, and it is such a privilege to be part of an organization where mental health and well-being of kids, and I'm going to add staff, are a priority. And it's such an awesome opportunity as parents who have made well-being a focus for tonight. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit about our well-being strategic plan. And then I'm going to move into talking a little bit about what that looks like in terms of creating mentally healthy schools. And then I'm going to take an opportunity to talk about what does it look like when we could focus on mentally healthy environments for our kids at home. So let's begin with the strategic plan. So when students are preoccupied, as parents, you probably know this to be very true. I have two kids of my own. They're a little bit older now, 21 and 18, and this was such a true statement when they were learners, and still are. They're still learners. When they're preoccupied with emotional concerns, they cannot fully participate in learning because they're preoccupied with emotional concerns. And we know that when students are feeling mentally well, they're available for learning. Therefore, as a school board, with that appreciation, we've made a commitment to well-being as a strategic priority for the board. We have 6 strategic pillars, and well-being is one of them. Because we believe it's our job to work collectively to make sure we're doing what we can to promote the well-being of our students, your children. When the well-being of our students is supported, whether it is at home, whether it's at school, whether it's in the community, we're meeting the conditions that they need to learn, to grow, and to develop a positive sense of self. And as much as we do in school boards every single day, the teaching, the caring, the helping, it's foundational to good mental health. So what do we mean by mental health, mental well-being? Well, we can talk about a sense of purpose, a sense of hope, a sense of belonging and meaning. And that's not just for our students, that's for each one of us in the room. Mental health, mental well-being is about each one of us having a sense of purpose, of hope, belonging, and meaning. And when we have that, we can explore life. We can take the risks that help us learn. We can also manage the challenges and adversity that are inherent in the world that we live in and the life that we lead. And we can contribute to the world around us. And schools are ideal places to promote mental health. And when we do that, we often can notice when concerns arise. And when we notice, we can often offer supports or services based on when we notice when kids need them and as they need them. I mean, we have 1/3 of your child's day, 2/3 of their year spent with us. What a wonderful opportunity to partner with you in supporting your child's mental health and well-being. And as schools then, we want to encourage wellness because we know it enhances learning and it has far-reaching lifelong impacts. So every day in our classrooms here across the DDSB, there are opportunities to inspire purpose, hope, meaning, belonging amongst our students, your children. And when we start early in life and reinforce the skills and habits that promote mental health within our caring classrooms from kindergarten to grade 12 and beyond, we set the standards for success. We help prevent and minimize the burden of what could be problems in the future. When we promote well-being in our schools, we allow opportunities for all of our students to celebrate and develop their gifts. achieve a true sense of belonging, experience joy, and learn the skills for life ahead. Isn't that great when you think about that as parents? You send your kids off to school in the hands of other caring adults with the purpose to ensure that we are celebrating your kids, we are exploring what their gifts are, and we're trying to set them on a course so that they can live life and live it to the fullest. And we thank you actually for that opportunity. But how do we do that? A lot of the language that we use here at the board is, you might heard someone say a whole school approach. If you haven't, I'm going to introduce that to you, a whole school approach. Well, what exactly does that mean? And how do we do that? A whole school approach recognizes that all aspects of a school community impacts the student mental health and their well-being, and that learning and mental health are linked, and that everyone who's a part of a school community is involved in and supporting making those links explicit. A whole school approach says it's everyone's responsibility to help kids flourish, to learn, to succeed, providing opportunities for them and the adults around them to develop the strengths and the skills needed to develop this thing that we are so focused on today, this idea of resiliency. At the DDSB, we believe a mentally healthy school board and the school sees positive mental health and well-being as fundamental to its mission, to its vision, and its culture. It's a school where mental health and well-being truly is everyone's business. A whole school approach involves all parts of the school board and the school community, and that includes you, working in partnership with you as parents. So given schools are these excellent places to promote mental health, to be able to notice when kids are struggling and to be able to offer more supports for them, one framework we use is, you see this triangle, is a bit of a tiered approach, multiple levels. We know that all students need those foundational conditions for them to thrive. We also know that some of our students need some more targeted supports, or maybe some prevention or intervention skills that can just give them a bit of that bolster or boost. And we do know that we have a few of our students that need more intensive services. So this becomes a bit of a framework for us to think about the initiatives that we do and the ways in which we support our students, and who within the school board do we want to mobilize for our supports. So for example, all that bottom tier, promoting mental health, that's the responsibility of every single staff, every single person here at the school board. All 7,000 plus staff are involved in supporting the mental health well-being of our students. The few might be some of our inclusive service staff, like our social workers or psychologists, who then can walk alongside some of the students that might have more intensive mental health needs and provide support either directly themselves or link them to more intensive services in the community. So building on this is where we find our strategic plan for mental health and well-being. It's intentionally and explicitly focused on establishing those foundational conditions for all students to thrive. I really want to draw your attention to the bottom tier. We believe as an essential ingredient to mental health promotion is ensuring we have a welcoming, inclusive, caring classroom environments where each student knows and feels that they belong and that they matter. Educators and other staff help students learn about mental health and develop mentally healthy habits. And Dan Hogan's going to talk about healthy habits as it relates to substance use. This is all part of the things that we are doing to create mentally healthy schools and classrooms where we want to nurture each student's unique identity, develop relationships and a sense of belonging and mattering. We want to help students learn to manage stress because we know kids have stress. And we want them to develop an optimistic outlook, which we know sometimes is difficult given the world events that we're all surrounded by. We want to teach about mental health in developmentally appropriate ways. We want to emphasize the skills like critical thinking and goal setting and problem solving and decision making. These are the skills that we need to rely on every day to do life, and we want to set the course for our kids so they can do that. We want to develop healthy habits, reduce stigma, get kids talking about, asking for help. There's no problem too big, there's no problem too small. And life is not meant to go it alone, and we want our kids to be having the conversations and seeking help as they need it, when they need it, and connecting to each other, and more importantly, to a caring adult in the school. These foundational the level or the tier that's there, welcome, include, understand, promote, and partner, this is the foundational goals of our strategic plan and the ways in which we want to move forward. Our vision at the DDSB, we want to take this knowledge, become intentional, explicit in the efforts to create a safe, welcoming, inclusive learning and working spaces to promote well-being for all students and staff. That's our vision, and that is our commitment to making well-being one of our strategic priority, and a priority that really aligns with all the other priorities, a priority that aligns with equity, it aligns with engagement, success. You can see that well-being is woven in the fabric of everything we do. It is the key to all of our students' success. It's what makes learning happen. So our goals are these 5 areas. We want to create welcoming environments where we're not just talking about does the space feel welcoming. While that's really important, we want them to have socially welcoming places. We want kids to feel like this is a place where they can think and their thinking is valued. We want our kids to be involved and see themselves, not just reflected in the classroom, which is important, reflected in the teacher who's sitting in front of them, but their lived realities is reflected in the walls and in the conversations and in the level of engagement that they have with the adults in the building. Understand is about knowing what goes into well-being and knowing our students, that deep knowledge of who your kids are and what matters to them and why that matters to them is so important for how we then can promote the environment within every classroom and every school where kids will thrive. And then we take that knowledge for promote and we teach based on that knowledge. We select teaching opportunities and we attend to the way in which your student learns based on what we know about them. And the last one is partner. I mean, that's why we're here. We're partnering with you because we know how important it is as parents that you have the expertise, you are the expert on your kids. We may have some expertise in curriculum development. I have a little bit of expertise in mental health and well-being, but you're the expert in your kids, and what an amazing and powerful partnership there is when school and parents come together to provide support for kids. This particular plan is grounded in some beliefs. One belief is that every single student needs to be surrounded by a caring adult who connects with kids, where kids feel respected, feel valued, and know they matter. Where we believe all kids need to be engaged in learning, where their ideas, their thoughts, their feelings, and have a place to find in the day to inform how we do what we do. That they have the right to a physically and emotionally safe environment, and that they can develop a positive sense of self and spirit that's reflected and around a hope for life that they have yet to live. So we launched this plan in 2018, and our focus on welcome and include, if I just go back for a moment, while it says welcome, include, understand, promote, and partner, that's not a linear. You don't welcome, then you include, then you understand, then you promote, then you partner. It doesn't quite work that way. They're very iterative. They're very dynamic. They feed off each other. But we did believe strongly that if kids didn't feel welcome into their space, they didn't feel included, then it would be difficult for them to feel like a teacher understood and truly knew them. And so we did spend our first year really focusing on creating those welcoming, inclusive learning spaces for our students. This year, we're focused on understand and promote, wanting to build the knowledge and literacy of everyone in this system, what goes into promoting and building positive mental health, and then what does that mean for everyday classroom practice. And so we focused our actions this year on 2 words, equip and support. We want to equip and support our system leaders and our school leaders around what it takes to create a mentally healthy school. We want to support and equip educators to understand what goes into fostering, maintaining a mentally healthy classroom. We want our students to have opportunities for engagement that's meaningful and resources for help seeking. And we want to support and equip you as parents and families with information that support the mental health of your children. And tonight is one of those opportunities where we hope you feel more equipped and better supported in supporting your student, your child, our students. And because well-being is woven into the fabric of all we do, there's so many connections across a school board where this is part of every day. So when we think about safe schools, our work around bully prevention, intervention, restorative practice, positive, you can see the list, and there's so much more. When I think about curriculum, when I think about student success, when I think about Indigenous education, everything that we do at the school board is connected to well-being. And as we partner with you, we all want children to feel mentally well. We all want kids to grow up happy, to navigate life's challenge, but it's not always easy to know what to do. My kids are 21 and 18, and I would still say, as much as they're much more independent than perhaps an 8 and 11-year-old, it's still, as a parent, it's not always easy to know what to do. And it's a journey that's difficult to do on your own. So we are really committed to be here to help you, to help each other, believing that we're in this together. Mental health is everyone's business. We all have a role to play. As a parent, as a guardian, you in particular have a special role in supporting your child's mental health. And naturally, this begins with your own children and your family members to help them grow into resilient, healthy adults. Understanding the sorts of skills that might help support good mental health in an ongoing way, to how to best do that in their regular family life, that's on the road to helping our kids do well. And again, Dan's going to talk about substance use. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that could look like, or what that looks like in our schools, and what that could look like at home. This is all part of doing that work together. And working together will lead to the best outcomes. And so we're so privileged to be on this journey with you. So I'm going to transition now to the workshop slides, which I thought there'd be a bit of a break. So if I had some background music, I'd play it right now. I'd hum, but then we want people to stay. This is just your evening laugh. Yeah, I know. I learn a lot about family functioning from ZITS, in case anybody wants to know some of my best mental health material comes from ZITS. So we're going to move in to talk about promoting mentally healthy communities. And I do want to talk about what that looks like at a school level. And then I do want to invite you to have some thinking alongside with me about what that could look like at home. And in mentally healthy communities, what I do want to stay a little bit high level. And the reason I want to do that is each one of the schools across the board have unique mental health initiatives that I would encourage you to reach out to your principal to say, what is it the school board's doing, or our school is doing, if you don't know, around specific mental health initiatives for the entire school. But as the entire school board, thinking about what can we do to mobilize all 7,000 staff members across every single school and every single classroom. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about one theme that runs deep throughout all the work that we're doing. And a bit of a spoiler alert, you're going to hear that theme repeated in what you can do at home. So hang on to your seats. I'm not going to spoil it quite yet. But I would like to get a sense of the room. How many parents in the room are secondary? And I know we probably have some both secondary and elementary. How many are elementary in the room? Okay. And when you think about the role of schools in promoting mental health, does anyone feel comfortable maybe sharing an idea? What do you think is the school's role in promoting mental health of students, your kids? Anyone have an idea? Thoughts? Right over here, Heather.
I have to say something. Yes, so I'm thinking in terms of promoting the mental health. I know they do a lot of work at my school on things like bullying.
Yeah.
And so having safe environments where people feel comfortable going to school and they're not afraid to go to school.
Yeah.
I know that when I was back in the day, many years ago, that wasn't something they really stressed. And I know a lot of people, literally, when I was growing up, I know a lot of people that were literally afraid to go to school.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that they're trying to provide a safe environment for the kids that they feel and they want to go to school and they're happy to go.
Yeah.
So that's one of
Yeah. And what an important reflection, because when we think about our vision, it is to create safe and inclusive learning spaces. And we know how important feeling safe is to learning, because your brain actually is wired to assess for safety. And if it doesn't feel safe, it's going to focus on safety and the threat. It is not going to focus on learning. So it's so important that we work very hard to create safe, welcoming spaces. So true. And we're going to talk a little bit, because whether you knew this or not, I suspect you all did, that issue of bullying has been spoken about as a relationship problem. And relationship problems require relationship solutions. So we're going to talk about relationships a lot in the next 20 minutes. Any other thoughts? And there's one at the back after, Heather. Why don't we hear from this parent, and then we'll go to the back, and then we'll...
I remember going to a school where they had a bench.
A bench.
So there was a bench that was created for the students, so those who didn't feel, welcome or having difficulty, because some students have a difficult time adjusting, then they would go and sit there, and then you'd have other students that would go and sit with them to make them feel more welcome. My son actually is in university right now, and he formed this organization called the Fight Inside,
Right.
and fighting against mental illness. He just did a workshop in Montreal on the weekend about this mental illness. So it is a big thing nowadays, and our students are struggling. I would say our teachers are struggling, if I'll be honest. And so it's something that we all need to be a part of and realize that, the healthier we are, the healthier our children will be.
Yeah.
And if we as a community come together and realize how much we need our input and how we need to be awakened or be more focused, right? When we're focused on our children's learning and say, what's really going on? Because sometimes they're going and they're struggling, but we don't see that because there are just too many other things going on with us. But when we begin to focus on them, then we'll begin to realize how much more attention we need to pay to our children. And I think that is very important. Needless to say, tomorrow is Pink Shirt Day, so let's remember that.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and you're raising a really good point, and you're sealing a little bit of the content, I have to say. But you're speaking to the power of showing up. We're going to talk about what that means as a parent, so I really appreciate you bringing that up. And did you still want to, yeah. I think you just need to press it one more time. No?
I think for me, it's also about teaching our kids about resilience. There are always going to be situations that happen at school that we can't control, and teaching our kids about resilience and also follow through. So if something happens and they go to a teacher and that teacher then follows through, and not assuming that somebody else has followed through with it. And then as the process goes on, that child gets support throughout that process, and the parent gets support throughout that process to the very end. And then reconnecting with that child to make sure that things, because these things can be very traumatic.
Yeah.
And so having that support continuous throughout is going to determine how that kid feels about the experience, as well as the support that's provided them.
Yeah. Yeah, and what an amazing point to raise. And actually, if I could try to thread the other two together, one of the research is pretty clear that we as parents, and I'm going to argue teachers, we need to show up with predictability and consistency. Kids need to be seen. not just, and I'm actually going to talk a little bit later about kids need to be seen, kids need to feel safe, and they need to be soothed. So we know challenges are going to happen, and it's not about protecting them from the challenge, it's being present with them through it. And I learned something new on the weekend, this idea of a snowplow parent. Have you guys heard of snowplow parents? And I'm pretty familiar with helicopter parent as a term, but snowplow, sort of like, think about how snowplow, it pushes all the snow away so cars can drive down the road. And literally, parents are plowing the challenges out of the experience of their kids so that life can feel smooth, which is actually not teaching them to deal with the adversities that life will give. So it's very interesting. But we're going to talk a little bit from, on the parent side, what does it mean to create safety? What does it mean for kids to be seen, truly seen? And what does soothing them, but not keeping them from challenges mean? And ultimately, the three of those combined create security and a sense of selfhood and a sense of resiliency in our kids. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. You guys, again, are helping me write the content. All right, so first half, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we focus on in schools, not specific initiatives, but this higher level thinking that we want our schools to be thinking about. And then we're going to look at what does that look like, and you're going to hear a lot of similarities for at home. But let's start with understanding, thinking about that, your comment about what is mental health, what is mental illness, how do we understand that so that we can at least start together on some shared understanding. And, you know, I think sometimes, historically, we used to talk about you're mentally ill or you're not. You're mentally healthy or you're not. And what we're learning is that mental health is not simply the absence of mental illness, just like physical health isn't the absence of physical illness. It's not simply the opposite end of a single spectrum, so they're not mutually exclusive from one another. Mental health can be best understood as a matrix where people move along the states of mental well-being regardless of mental health or mental illness. They can flourish or languish depending on lots of different things. Individual functioning, what kind of social support or network do they have? Are there any other health issues or any other mental health issues? And given that mental health and well-being are not exclusive, with proper care and support, a student with mental illness may have a very positive mental health. And an adult with mental illness can have very positive mental health. Likewise, a student with any diagnosable mental health can experience, without a diagnosed mental health, can experience poor mental health. And many of you may know someone who perhaps experiences depression or anxiety. And if they have a strong community support around them, perhaps they're medicated, perhaps not, perhaps they're seeing a therapist, perhaps not, they may have really strong self-care. And they would say to you, I feel good, I am strong, I am mentally healthy, I'm flourishing. And I suspect some of you, if you're in a particular profession that has a year end to it, you can see year-end approach, and some of your colleagues that you know may not have a mental health diagnosis, but their mental health isn't very good as they feel the stress of deadlines, and perhaps their self-care practices aren't really good. And so they may have languishing mental health versus flourishing mental health. And so, you know, our focus is to optimize opportunities to support mental health, because mental health relates to how we think, feel, behave, and interact with other people. Therefore, it makes sense to consider we all have mental health, or this idea that there is no health without mental health. And our focus at the DDSB is promoting optimal mental health, which is about fostering the development of positive mental health by supporting individual resilience. We heard resilience is important, creating supportive environments, and addressing the influence of broader determinants of mental health. And I would argue with you the most powerful determinant of mental health is relationships. You know, for our youth, when they think about mental health, they think about things like, you know, can I think about my future? Do I have people that care about me? Am I happy? Do I like myself? Are there things that I have to live for? Is there a dance I can go to? Is there a team that I'm going to play for? Like, some of the things that influence their mental health are about the things that directly impact their day-to-day. And when we think as a school, we play a very important role in promoting good mental health by the things that we say and do, and through the environment we create at school. Again, this idea of how do we create those safe environments for kids. And when we focus on mental health, this slide is going to sound familiar. We are celebrating the gifts and the true sense of belonging for all of our students. So let me tell you about the structure here at the DDSB that goes into supporting student mental health and well-being. So every single school board actually across the province has a mental health leader. That's my role. I'm a senior clinician. I've been working in the field of children's mental health for 20 plus years. And I came to the board to support them in thinking about what are the mental health initiatives that can create those conditions where all kids can thrive. And so every, I don't know, Nora can help me, 72 school boards across the province, publicly funded. There are 72 mental health leads, and often some of them play a dual role where they might supervise social work and psych services and do mental health lead. We have the privilege here at the board, perhaps because of our size, to have a unique role as a mental health lead, and myself partnering with our social work and our psych services leads to do the work of supporting students. There's a superintendent who's responsible for mental health. Her name is Superintendent Georgette Davis. We have mental health leadership team where there are people from different program areas as well as direct educators in classrooms that are helping us think about what works at a school level and a classroom level. We have a strategic plan. Everything we do finds its home in that plan. Because there's so many, and you probably have been part of some really great mental health activities. And because there's so many to choose from, we use a strategic plan as our guidepost. It's like our Inukshuk. It's the marker along our journey to say, are we on track for meeting the vision and the mission and the goals that we have, not only as an organization, but our commitment to well-being. We have inclusive services where we know that kids that have more intensive needs along the whole pathway of care, where we identify, assess, support, and offer. We have our social work and psych services team, and we do very much think about how we understand the needs of our students, how we get them to, through, and from services that might be helpful to them. So our work across the DDSB is primarily focused on promoting mental health and well-being, where we're defining the scope of work as being about all students. And we know the stats are about 1 in 5 children will deal with a mental health or have a mental health challenge within their lifetime. So if you think 1 in 5, superintendents in the room, once we're teachers can tell me that's what 4 to 6 kids in any classroom could be struggling with their mental health. And so it is so important for us to walk alongside those 4 or 6, that 1 in 5. But we also know if we believe that everyone has mental health, we all have mental health, then it is wise for us to invest in the 5 out of 5 students to ensure that every classroom has the conditions in place that will help all of our students thrive. And that is what we've done. But we do guide our decisions based on this multi-leveled, multi-tiered. So we look at what is good for all, and that is the bulk of our influence, those foundational, everyday things that we can do to welcome and include students, to help build our knowledge of mental health and promote the habits, and to partner with you as parents to create a supportive environment. When we talk about this with our educators, the staff here at DDSB, it is all about relationship building, caring, attuned, responsive relationships with your students. And we know that as educators, when we create a safe, welcoming, inclusive environment where we teach kids how to maintain good mental health, that the outcomes are much more probable for our kids. And we are an education system. We want academic outcomes. When kids are not doing well, they're not going to learn. And we know that no kids learn in the absence of a relationship either. And so that really is where our focus is for our good for all first level. In Tier 2, we know that there are some kids that need more. We've talked a little bit about that, how early identification can happen. We might pull in school mental health professionals like our social workers and perhaps some psychologists. We also have guidance and student success teachers or CERTs and other trained staff that can support identifying when your student might need more support. And then the essential for a few is that third layer where there is more significant help needed for our students. But when we focus on that bottom layer, one question I often ask our educators to contemplate is this. Hold on, not the circles. Is this critical reflection for educators? And, you know, as educators, it's important to have a strategy and a tool to be able to do the work that we do and do it well. But one of the things, the invitation that I might and we might suggest is it's not so much a predictor of what you know about education. The question we want to ask our educators isn't that you are educating in the right way. The question is, are you the adult you want your student to grow up to be? And one of the things that we know is our teachers are experts in curriculum. Our focus boils down to this. How do we nurture the enabler that makes learning happen? Relationships. How do we nurture relationships? The power in our strategic plan and our commitment to well-being rests on our teachers showing up every day, using the power of their presence and relationship building to create learning environments where kids feel safe, included, and ready to learn. So here's what we know, educators, what they do every day is curriculum. That's their expertise. How they do that, though, is through relationships. Why they're doing that is human development. They're really growing the next generation of people. And so one of the things that we might hear is they, put out curriculum and deal with behavior and look at discipline and get all that content out. One of the things that we often share with our educators is this: connection before correction. Contact before content. Relationship allows the actions that we do in delivering the curriculum and how we hold the classroom behavior in a container. That's the enabler for relationship. Kids need to know that they matter. Otherwise, why do what we would have to say to them? Why would that matter to them? So here is our sophisticated but ever so powerful invitation to educators. Sometimes it's the little things that have the significant difference. So a warm welcome. You may or may not know that there was some research done around educators welcoming kids in the classroom intentionally every single day. 9% decrease in disruptive behaviors, 20% increase in engagement, and a gain of 1 hour of teaching a day, simply by welcoming a child into the classroom. Simple, yet powerful. And so we invite our educators, how are you welcoming students into the day? A smile. If any family in the room is like my family, some days we walked out of the house not smiling at each other because someone, maybe me, got up late. Someone, maybe my kids, didn't have lunch together. Someone, my partner, didn't put the keys in the right spot. So you can see how all of that culminates into nobody's really happy when they leave the house. And when I would love it if I knew that my kids walked into a classroom and a teacher said, my son's name is Cole, Cole, I'm so glad you're here today. The day would not be the same if you weren't here. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to school. If I knew that happened, man, my heart would sing because I knew someone cared about my son. It's a big deal to give your kids to someone every single day. And so a warm welcome, a smile, a connection to a caring adult every day, a chance to learn, a safe place to risk, someone who notices when something is wrong, someone who reaches out when they notice, someone who listens and tries to find help, someone who believes in them and instills hope. Every day, that's good for every single student. And that's the stuff that helps our kids thrive. And so, yes, it's important to have good pedagogy and good curriculum and all the language that we use here in education, to have a strategy, a tool, a growth plan. But in the absence of this, which is at the heart of a strong, caring, tuned, responsive relationship, it's difficult to use any tool. And so we invite our educators to welcome, to smile, to connect. These are the importance, because education is always about relationships. Great teachers are not just instructors and test administrators, they're mentors, coaches, motivators, lifelong sources of inspiration to our students, to your kids. Positive transformations result when a struggling child has a good fortune to experience that one caring adult who believes in them, they know they matter, and they're secure in the knowledge that they have a meaningful and authentic connection. For our educators, this is how you create mentally healthy schools. How about at home? I think we're going to have to motor for this part, aren't I? How do we create mentally healthy home environments? So I think the reflection is still a good one to ask ourselves. Who we are and how we engage in the world are much stronger predictors of how our children will do than what we know about parenting. So you can pick up pamphlets around how to do positive discipline, to grow resilient children, to speak to teens. These are all great. They're absolutely fantastic tools with really good evidence around how and why these ideas work. But I would still compel you to ask the question, and it isn't, are you parenting in the right way? The question is, are you the adult you want your children to grow up to be? You know, a few assumptions about parenting and creating a mentally healthy home. One is you don't have to be perfect. Nobody is. Nobody is. There's no such thing. There's no formula for perfect parenting. You apply every little flip chart of that positive discipline, no, you will not become a perfect parent, because you're not. There's no such thing as flawless parenting. You know, there's so many health books. There's, parenting on this and parenting on that. It can feel confusing and, if not, overwhelming. Committed, thoughtful, intentional parents, which I suspect all of you are because you're here. Committed, thoughtful, intentional parents, we often can fall prey to feeling inadequate. We worry that we're not good enough in the way that we raise our kids. We worry that we're spending too much time on them, or we worry we're not spending enough time. We're worried. And when you're not sure, and when you're in that space of worry, one piece of advice that the research on what makes the most difference to our kids is this: just show up. Just show up. And showing up sounds a little bit like how it sounds. Be present. Be there for your kids physically, but focus on the quality of the presence. Provide it when you're meeting your needs, when you're expressing love to them, when you're disciplining, when you're laughing, when you're arguing. Show up means bring your whole self, your attention, your awareness. When you're with your child, when you show up, you're there mentally, emotionally, physically in that moment. It may mean for some of us to put our phones down. It may mean for some of us to metaphorically take the to-do list that's creating some stress for us and find a place for it to sit while we sit present to our kids. It might mean not thinking about the argument you had with your partner or wondering how you're going to get the meal on the table. And not that those things aren't important to think about, but how do we carve out time to say, there will be time for that, and just be present in the moment to our kids. For some of us, this comes naturally, and for others, maybe myself, it's not always so easy to do. But when a caregiver predictably, not perfectly cares for a child, the child will enjoy positive outcomes even when faced with challenges. The long-term research on child development would say that the one best predictor of what any child turns out in terms of happiness, social emotional development, leadership skills, relationships, and even academic success is whether they developed security with having at least one person show up for them. One person show up for them. Look familiar? What do all kids need at home? They need a warm start to their day. They need a connection to someone who cares about them every day. A chance to learn, a safe place to risk, someone who notices something's wrong, who reaches out when they notice, who listens and tries to problem solve, who believes and instills hope. That's what's important for our teachers every single day. That's what's important for us with our kids every day. Whether mine are 21 and 18 or yours are 11 and 6. Our kids need us at home to start their day, to smile, to connect, to risk. A little bit of science. Did you know that kids' brains are under construction up until the age of 25? Is there anyone who has kids under the age of 25 in this room? Of course. That means everything you do, you are actually being a brain sculptor and changer. You know, a reliable present is one of the most significant brain development strategy and impact on the actual architecture of your child's brain, because the brain adapts to new experiences. So what it takes in, people that it sees, hears, thinks about, practices, anything that we give attention to. Have you heard this phrase, what gets wired gets fired, or what gets fired gets wired? This idea that where attention goes, the brain circuitry fires based on that attention. And so what gets fired gets wired. And when we think about that, a parent then who consistently shows up, your child's mind comes to expect then that the world is a safe place, can be understood and meaningfully interacted with, even in times of trouble or challenges. And so showing up creates neural pathways that leads to things like resiliency, grit, a sense of self. If you do nothing else but provide your child the experience of feeling safe, soothed, seen, and secure most of the time, read how it doesn't say absolutely every single time, because it realizes that we're not perfect, you're doing the most powerful thing you can to build a resilient brain. I'm going to go really quickly through the safe, soothe, seen, and secure, because what is that? What do we mean by that? So safety is how are we safely engaging with our kids? Kids need to know that they're safe, that we are safe emotionally, relationally, and that, you know, we're not frightening or hurting our kids. Now, that being said, I'm not a perfect parent, and I've made mistakes, and I've often raised my voice and probably said things that have hurt my kids. That's not what this is talking about, because even if that does happen, safety, when we mess up or they mess up with us, we prioritize repairing as soon as we can. And so when we step into a space that we don't feel good about, when we repair, that creates a sense of safety for our kids, and it lets them know that we love each other, want to make things right, and that in and of itself, consistently shared, creates a sense of safety. Seen is about this physical seeing, so attending events that matter to kids. I don't know what movie it was, that singing pig song movie. Do you guys remember that? Was it just Sing? Is that what it's called, Sing? Okay. So when my daughter was young, she wanted to go sing. My husband's like, I'm not going to see that movie. And so they went to see something else. You know, the therapist mom in me was like, I can't believe you just did that. You just compromised some kind of attachment with our daughter. This idea, though, how do you attend to events that matter? So if they want to see Sing, go see Sing. Right? If they want to play Lego or play with Play-Doh on your kitchen counter, you don't like the grease, what would it take for you to play anyways? Doing things that matter to them. Now, that being said, it's actually so much more than that as well. It's about attuning to what you not only see, but don't see. So what is beneath behavior? Behavior is always communication. And when we see behavior, there's always a feeling or a thought underneath it. And that feeling, when that is about a need, and we need to meet that need rather than the behavior. And if you're wondering why sometimes when we focus on behavior, it just seems to continue to pop up, you might want to ask yourself, what might be beneath that? What need might my child be expressing? And when we focus on the behavior, the need behind the behavior, we're dealing with the cause, not the symptom, we may start to see something different. Sometimes we talk about what's going on for kids as that internal landscape, and if we get them to, if we see their internal landscape, we teach them to identify what the need is behind the emotion and behind the thought. And not only then do they start doing that for themselves, they might do that for others. Do we really see our kids? And soothe, how do we help them deal with difficult emotions and situations? So this doesn't mean we take away any challenges that are in front of them, but even when they're hurting, we let them know we will be there. We let them know that life does come with pain, but it also comes for them with this deep awareness that we will not let them go it alone. Safe, seen, soothe leads to security, and security is based on predictability, not perfection. Because we already know that no parent can parent without making mistakes. Rather, it's about letting your kids know that they can count on you time and time again to show up. That security comes when you believe that they're going to keep them safe, you're going to work hard for them to be seen. And when they come to you and things don't go their way, you will be there so they don't go it alone. And this, in turn, leads to kids approaching life from the assumption that even if life is difficult, they can handle the world that they live in. So in the same way we invite teachers to prioritize relationships, parenting is all about developing those relationships. Connection before correction, content before content applies. And what this does is it creates safety and security in the environment. It's a focus that we have for our teachers. It's a focus, I'd say, for you. There's power in showing up. Your parental presence literally shapes who your kids will become. So I think I'm going to kind of skip over a few slides, because when we're able to see, soothe, support, and have the security with our kids, when there are concerns, how important it is to know that they don't have to go it alone. There are things that there are markers. You want to be concerned about any changes. If you're concerned, speak to your teacher, speak to your student, speak to your child's principal. There are processes here in the board to help support students. If you're concerned and you don't know what's going on, find someone to talk to. And there are supports in the community if you need them. Don't forget to take care of yourself. It's so important that you take care of yourself. Otherwise, this might happen. Calm, present parenting requires you to take care of yourself, to show up every day. You need to take good care of yourself, and each one of you will have a different recharge mechanism. It's just a matter of finding what works for you and prioritizing that. Replenishing your emotional fuel is an essential parenting skill in the process of showing up. So it's nearly impossible to respond in a calm way if you don't recognize your own strength. You probably heard you can't pour from an empty cup. So don't watch your cup. Keep it full enough and keep filling it up. And I end with this: there's no such thing as a perfect parent. Just be a real one. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for your attention. I don't know if there's any questions or comments. I know I didn't give you sort of magic 1, 2, 3 or step program, but I think I did give you what's important if you're going to do any of those, because in the absence of a relationship, those tools will likely fall flat on your child. And so we want to make sure that a relationship becomes the container for everything that we do. So thank you very much for your attention and your time.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Stephanie will be here. We're going to take a little break right now, so if you have any questions or that, I'm sure she'll welcome you approaching her. So about 10 minutes, and then we have Dan Hogan with a really interesting presentation. And there is some water and some snacks there at the back.
just start.
Let's get going.
Okay.
Let's pull them in and.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I'll test my mic soon. I think, yeah. So I think we're going to get started. The best mic test for me right now is to just point to the screen and say it's really important to understand that there's a trigger alert that I give whenever I give a presentation. It's generally, I can trigger people with the things that I say and the way I behave up front. No, that's not the case. It's the fact that I will be talking about substance use, and substances do have an impact in everyone's life at some point. So it's important that if you are feeling triggered, that if you need to, feel free to step outside the room, that someone from here will go out and talk with you for a bit. Stephanie might even do it as a professional counselor. But if not, if you just need some space, please feel free to take it. And if you need to speak to me after, I will stay after for a little while so that we can speak. I'm going to be talking about promoting healthy habits for youth, but particularly about shifting your attitudes or the attitudes of the general population around drug use. So I'm going to start with a little story, and this is a story that gets you to know me. So in 1981, I was in a tank with 3 of my best friends. It was summer, it was hot, we were sweating, and we thought we were going to die. We were really quite scared. We didn't know what was going to happen to us. When we initially got in the tank, we didn't think anyone would be able to find us. We were doing a great job. Yet we found out they were looking for us, and we think they were tracking us down pretty quickly. So we were quite nervous. And of course, my friend Brian, who was a regular smoker at that point, decides he cracks open his pack of De Maurier, and he passes a cigarette, lights it up, and we all start smoking our cigarettes. And my friend John, he had a little Mickey in his pocket, and he pulled it out. It was a Mickey of whiskey, and passed it around. We all drank from that whiskey. Now, I hope everyone at this point is going, how old is Dan? That in 1981, he's in a tank, and what conflict was Canada in 1981? Well, it wasn't that tank that I was in, but it actually, and I actually found this tank. It was this tank. This is a memorial at Downsview Military Base. It's moved slightly since I was there, but it was there. I was 13, and we had taken the bolts out of the bottom of the tank, and it had been emptied out, and me and my 13-year-old friends decided to go in there because that would be a great place to hide and smoke cigarettes and drink. I am 13 years old. This is not a good thing, but I'm 13 years old and I'm in a tank and I'm smoking and drinking, and it is 1981. Oh, the reason I was scared to death is because the MPs saw us and they were looking for us, and they were driving around the area, and we could see them circling, and kept peeking out underneath. Now, I got home and I reeked of cigarettes, and my parents said, "Oh, you really smelled." And I said, "Yeah, I was at Brian's house." Easy to get away with, because Brian's family smoked, and you just going in your house, you'd smell the cigarettes. But the bad news about the story is Brian is now dead. Brian died of cancer. He became a regular smoker, and he died of cancer about 4 or 5 years ago. And John is a regular smoker and an alcoholic. I'm the only one who kind of beat the odds in that situation, because I was an early user of alcohol and cigarettes. So this is another picture that might be interesting to you. This is 1978 or 79, I'm not quite sure. The person with the flower on it is my father, and the young man with the tie, that is me. And you might notice that in my hand I have a stubby. A stubby is a bottle of beer. Alcohol was given out at I think at my cousin's wedding. We would have been somewhere in Mimico in Toronto, and I would have been not the only one of that age group drinking, and that would probably not be my only beer for the night. I would have probably had 2 or 3 over a course of a long night of dancing and having fun. But again, normalized. It was okay. We've actually come a long way now. We know so much more than we did then. And I think we need to start moving away from that. I was really glad to have Stephanie talk before me, because she said so many of the points that are really going to be important in this presentation. But I also, in making this presentation, I wanted to pick some slides and things that would resonate with you to get you thinking about why we have to have a change in the conversation. So, cost of substance use in Canada, $14 billion a year. That's in lost productivity, in health care, in legal cost, $14.7 billion. $5 billion on alcohol alone. Alcohol is causing $5 billion worth of costs that actually comes out of your pocket every year. These are your tax dollars that need to go fund these things. The LCBO taxes do not cover this. When this is happening, this is actually taking away from money that could go to education. When people are in the hospital because they've smoked all their lives, it takes money away from education. Cannabis users, again, cannabis is actually relatively low in there. It's 8% of the overall cost. We may see it go up now that cannabis is legalized, because in this study it wasn't legalized yet. So we're looking at really high dollars, high costs that we need to be aware of, and that's why we should change things. $1,074 every year you're paying just to deal with people's substance use. So youth intoxication happens way too often, and it's really a serious medical emergency because we're seeing it a lot. And I chose these slides specifically to get you guys thinking about some of the issues around alcohol. So 12 to 24-year-olds were analyzed across all the Canadian cities and how often they went into emergency wards. And we're seeing that kids are ending up in emergency wards every 2 days. There's a kid between 12 and 24 in an emergency ward every 2 days with alcohol poisoning. Pretty serious. It's kind of alarming that they're going in there at that rate. Now, the average age is still 20. It's at the upper end, so that's your college kids, the kids who are graduating high school and moving off to college. And it's male and female. They're both hitting there. And scary enough, 2 weeks ago, my neighbor down the street, my middle son is 16, one of his buddies, 16, ends up in the emergency room, alcohol poisoning. It's not something that's alien to me. 75% of them are consuming high-content alcohol drinks, so they're drinking mixed drinks with liquor in them, and they're not understanding the difference between beer, wine, and spirits, so that they think the alcohol content in a beer is the same as the alcohol content in a shot. and they're drinking the same amount of whiskey as they would if they were just drinking a beer. And so they're ending up in the ERs. 25% of the people who show up there are in code 1 or 2, meaning their lives are actually in danger. They're not breathing, they're having problems like that. 50% of them, 57% have complications such as coma. So they come in and they're actually in a coma. They've had a head injury. Again, the most leading, one of the things I talk about with kids is the probability of being injured. And I talk about probability of being injured, and I ask them, what's the probability of you being injured by your toilet? And we've gone through a whole bunch of probability exercises, and they go, I don't know, and 1 in 2 million, 1 in 3 million, because we talked about lotteries and strikes by lightning, and it's actually 1 in 10,000. 1 in 10,000 people. So here in Whitby, 2 people will end up in the hospital this year with a toilet bowl injury. Which is really, what's a toilet bowl injury? Well, it's they're intoxicated and they need to vomit, and they go to the bathroom, and while in the bathroom they pass out and they bang their head off the toilet bowl. It's the most common toilet bowl injury. So this is what's happening. The other one, particularly this time of year, that we need to be concerned about is hypothermia. Parents and friends were contacted in 59% of the time. This is a strange stat. These are, for the most part, kids who are not adults, and parents are not contacted about them going to ERs. It's very scary. I know that when my son's friend John had the issue, his friends realized he was in trouble. And so the first thing they did is they said, we better call John's brother, because John's brother's just a year older than him and has his license and could come and get him, because he didn't want to call the parents. And then when he got home, he spent a fair bit of time, because Mom actually had to go get him, with his brother to get him in the car on the lawn out front before they realized, oh, this isn't going well. This is not, he's going to get sick a little bit and then walk it off and go to bed. 40% were offered follow-up, 52% weren't even offering counseling at the ER. So this is a kind of a stat that we're not taking this seriously enough, that we need to be really serious about kids drinking. And kids drinking is a substantial thing. So everyone often thinks when I speak about drugs that I'll talk a lot about cannabis and other drugs, but the number 1 drug is still alcohol, and it's by far more than 3 times as much as any other drug in terms of use. So we need to educate young people about the risks about being intoxicated. And we need to make sure that they're consuming, if they're going to be consuming drinks, they need to know what they're about. So in terms of me working with our educators, I talk to our phys ed department heads, and we talk about, are we talking about this? And they are, but it needs to be emphasized, because what we're seeing in college level is those kids don't remember any of that. And we need to make sure that the parents and guardians are contacted and the kids are offered professional help too. So these are important things. So I'm going to throw in a little quick video clip, talk about boundaries. And I love these video clips.
Dude, we should get wasted.
No, man. My mom's been totally on my back about that.
Oh, come on, dude. How's she gonna...
I can hear you, dude.
Keep on your kids about not drinking. Set clear no alcohol rules early.
This is one of the things that people are starting to really notice now. The research really says that if you set those boundaries and rules early and stick with them, even when they're 18 years old and you say, no, you're not drinking, you're not 19 in my house. I know it's really a challenge because it's something different for, like you look at me and you go, geez, 10. You're sitting there drinking with your dad at 10. My 19-year-old never had a drink with me until he turned 19. Because I learned these things that the stats say you have to set those boundaries and be clear about them. You need to let kids know that drinking is not something they can do until they're of age. and that you're not going to encourage it. And the one thing that I always like to talk about is the party. You know, that party where you say, the parent says, I'm going to have them party at my house because then I can control the situation. The stats actually indicate that the kids who are in that house, the kid whose parents invited them, are actually more likely to drink than anybody else at everyone else's party too. So they're actually more at risk because they see it as something that is acceptable by their parents. It's okay to drink. Parents let me drink when I'm at home. I can drink when I'm out too then. So now I'm going to switch themes a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about cannabis. Cannabis is the new hot trend now because it's now legal. And that's okay. I'm okay with it being legal. Again, it comes with some risks associated with it. And every time I talk about risks associated with cannabis, you can talk about those risks with all drugs, so including alcohol. So we know that daily use or near daily use can lead to mental health issues and concerns for different people. It can lead to dependency. So cannabis is not something that's just harmless. And youth are more, I'm going to say it wrong, someone's susceptible to dependency than adults. Because of what Stephanie talked about, their brains are still developing until they're 25. In actuality, people who've never used substances who wait till they're 25 almost never become dependent. But kids raise their risk from 1 out of 10 to 1 out of 6 when they're early starters. So it's important to give them some time. Of course, we know the risk to driving, so we've got a few parents of students who are in high school. We know that the students are more likely to drive high than they are to drive while they're intoxicated by alcohol. We've really drummed home that message around alcohol for a long time, but the risks are very similar for cannabis. And we also know that when students use cannabis, they sometimes use alcohol as well. And so it's having those clear message and boundaries around that, making sure that they know that there's zero tolerance for that. There's this misperception that cannabis is harmless. And again, there are toxic carcinogens, chemicals found in tobacco smoke and in cannabis smoke. And when it gets into your lungs, it can have lung effects. So students need to know that. And I know that our students are getting this information from their health teachers. I was at a school today, and oh, that reminds me. Stephanie mentioned the handshake. I was at R.H. Cornish today, and I watched a teacher. He had his nice tie on, his little suit jacket, and he was greeting his grade 3s one at a time at the door, shaking every hand as the kid came in. I thought it was amazing, an amazing way to connect. Pregnancy. Students should know, and you should know, that substances such as cannabis and alcohol can be transferred to the fetus. There's an effect, and using cannabis as pregnant or breastfeeding is not a safe option. The latest thing that just happened, as of December 17th, cannabis edibles became legal in Canada as well. It actually became legal November 17th to create them, but they weren't going to be marketed until December 17th. So now we're starting to see them on the shelves, but they're still not legal for people under the age of 19. So no one under the age of 19 should have them, but it's important for students to know and adults to know that they're different than smokables. So when you're smoking something, it takes about a minute to start to feel the effects. And after about 30 minutes, you're feeling the full effects. It takes about 30 minutes to 2 hours to feel the effects of an edible. And you're getting full effects at about 4 hours. Yes?
Plans going on to start talking to younger primary age kids and junior age kids around the idea of not eating things from friends. I know I have those conversations with my kids, but I think there's probably a more tactful way for them to understand the impact of here, have a little bite of my chocolate bar. It's delicious. I found it at home on the shelf.
Certainly there is room for it in the curriculum. It fits in the health curriculum, and it fits really from about grade 1 on, where you can have those conversations, because you're talking about what's safe and not safe within a household. So you're talking about cleaning products, vitamins, medicines that are on. You can talk about all those things in terms of that, and I think that should be covered in those areas as well.
Look like a regular chocolate bar, a regular gummy bear. Like, they look like food that a primary age kid would want to try.
Absolutely.
So bringing it to school wouldn't be out of this world to think could happen.
And teachers, I know that teachers are aware of that, because I'm starting to get calls. I'm actually going out to a grade 3 class next week to have that conversation with them, and it's very much along those lines about comparing what is safe, what is unsafe, where the line is. Extracts are also a thing that comes out, and you'll see on the tables, I've got my drug boards here, as well as, and we can pass these around. If you haven't seen a vaping product before, I have vaping products here so you can take a look at them in different ones. But what happens with vapes is that they can also be used and modified so that they can use cannabis extracts as well. And so that the oils from cannabis plant can go in here and you can get high off them as well. And that's something that people aren't aware of, but the kids certainly are in high school. They're aware of that. And kids don't like to smoke. Kids truly don't like to smoke now. It's at an all-time low. It's like 8%, which is lower. Again, I talk about when I was in the tank. When I was in the tank, it was about 45% of students were smoking. And now it's down to 8. But 22% of students are now vaping. And that's the last survey in 2018 that was done and just released this month. So that says to me that stat even may have gone up a little bit more since then. So there is some concern about the amount of vaping that's going on. Possession for students is still a problem. So it is illegal for students to possess any cannabis. They get fined up to 5 grams. Over 5 grams, they still could be charged with possession. And if they pass it to someone, again, distribution is a possibility as well. And again, there are legal consequences for driving while high. So. Now, it's important to understand, I have really good kids. And my kids hate when I do a drug presentation, because I often throw them into it. My oldest son, who's now just finishing off at Durham College, was a really good kid, and I had to hold his head out of the toilet when he was 17 because he was a really good kid and made a mistake. Kids make mistakes all the time, so even good kids.
That's me, a canvas for my friend's artwork. How did I end up here? Well, I'm a good kid, so my parents assumed I'd never drink underage. But all kids get offered alcohol. Now, school isn't going well. My parents think it's a phase, but I don't know. My brain is still developing, so I'm more at risk for addiction. Even good kids need help to make good decisions. Mom, Dad, please set clear rules. Absolutely no underage drinking.
All right, so now I get to skip to the topic. I was at a school at R.H. Cornish. The reason I was at R.H. Cornish was they wanted me to come up and speak to their grade 6s about vaping, because vaping is something that is creeping down into all lower grades, and they're seeing it. And again, if you look at the picture here, the people are holding iPhones, they're holding different devices, and they're holding vapes. And vape is a technology that is really attractive to kids because they think it's a technology. I remember when I got my digital watch and my calculator, how cool I thought I was. Again, I'm dating myself. But kids think they're pretty cool when they have this electronic thing that they can plug into their computer, and then they can blow smoke clouds, and they think it's harmless because they're getting these messages. And the messages are coming from adults too. We're hearing it all the time. Adults are using vapes and they're saying that they're better for you than smoking. Well, that kind of language actually sounds like I'm saying that smoking's good and vaping's better. Improve your health. Improve your health, grab a cigarette. Improve your health even more, vape. But that's not what they're actually saying. Vaping is actually bad for you. It's probably not as bad as smoking, and the research is pretty clear on that already, that if you are a smoker and you're choosing to vape, it's probably a good idea. Don't smoke. Vaping is less dangerous. The secondhand vaping fumes are less toxic. It's probably better for you. But they're not harmless. So there's a number of chemicals in vapes that people are not aware of. There are the chemicals that are actually food-grade chemicals that you can actually ingest, but they're not designed to be heated in an element with the other chemicals in there. They actually change. They're volatile, and they change their properties when they are heated and sucked into your lungs, not your stomach. This can be dangerous for the kids because it could be carcinogenic. We also know that there are heavy metals in many of the products that are being created offshore. There are little to no regulations on them. Nicotine. There is nicotine in the vast majority of the products. So the kids will say there are lots of products that do not have nicotine in them, and they're correct. However, my friends at Tobacco Enforcement, when they come and they confiscate these non-nicotine products and they take them to labs, 75% of them actually contain nicotine because the people who are creating them are not regulated. So no one's really checking, and having nicotine in them ensures that someone comes back to buy more. We're not sure about the long-term consequences of vaping right now. We do know it's linked to lung disease, and we're seeing it in the media increasingly. So November, October, we saw a lot of media reports about vaping and students, young people, ending up in the hospital, older people as well, with lung conditions. And 1,500 people died in the United States in that period. And I think 3 people died in Canada related to. Now, that vaping actually, if we look at it really closely, had to do with one of the products that was in it. So it was a vitamin E gel that they put in the product to stabilize it and make it look thicker, because thicker vape juice is better vape juice, according to people who vape. And it was also in almost exclusively a cannabis oil-based product. So it was people smoking cannabis oils, although there were a couple exceptions. So there have been some deaths. In the late 1980s, in a factory in the United States run by the Orville Redenbacher Corporation, there was a leak of the artificial butter oil into the air, and it was a consistent leak that was going on for quite a while. And what happened was a number of the employees developed a lung inflammation that they couldn't get rid of afterwards, that changed the shape of their alveoli, the things that bring in the air in your lungs, and coated them so that they were not effective in processing oxygen. And so they had lung disease. And they termed that disease popcorn lung, based on the fact that it came out of the Orville Redenbacher factory. Many of the oils that are used in vapes are based on that same type of oil. I have an e-juice container here as well, and if you want, you can come and take a look at it. This one is really for someone who is a smoker. It's menthol tobacco. This is the least popular flavor going. This is something that a smoker would buy, but they have also lots of other really good flavors like root beer and vanilla creamsicle and cherry. And so I wonder who those are addressed to, because I know the smokers tend to go to that menthol tobacco one. The people who are non-smokers are looking at the other vape products. And in some rare occasions, the vape products, because they're electronic, explode, and there have been some burns. Again, really rare stuff. Vaping is probably better for you than smoking. Some of the other side effects, dry mouth, dizziness, cough, dry skin, dry eyes, rashes, insomnia, bleeding. Nicotine actually dilutes your blood so that you don't clot as well. And so it's an anti-clotting agency, so you're more likely to bleed, you're more likely to get nosebleeds. Stephanie talked about it. Nicotine actually affects the brain. It affects brain development, particularly in adolescents. Because their brains are at a critical phase, it changes how the brain, and there actually is some research indicating that nicotine is a primer for other addictions. So children who are using, or students who are using nicotine products like a vape are more likely to be addicted to other products later on as well, such as alcohol, such as cannabis, such as cocaine. So now you guys are going to get with the times a bit here. How are you going to look after these kids when they're got all these vape products and they've got alcohol and cannabis in their lives, exposures? So here's what
Texting your kids can prevent underage drinking.
So hitting them where they live, right, is starting to use the devices they like to use. Communication is the key, though. It's communicating with your kids. So just so that people understand, I don't know if people are aware that the vaping laws have changed in Ontario last October, 2 Octobers ago actually now. Vaping is now permitted within 20 meters of school property. So they can, I just said that wrong, did I not? Did I say that wrong? Vaping is not permitted within 20 meters of school property. That is 3 car lengths away from school property, which is really important to understand. So kids cannot vape or smoke anywhere near a school. That also goes for adults. Adults need to be at least 3 car lengths away from a school before they can light a cigarette up or vape. So it's important to know that. It's important to understand that passing an e-cigarette to someone who's underage, even if you're underage yourself, is against the rules and it is against the law. And kids can be fined. We just don't want them exposed, and the government does not want them exposed to the harms of e-cigarettes. So here are some of the risk factors and the mitigating factors that help. So risk factors, family history, and this is for substance use. So if in your family there's a history of substance use issues, you're more at risk. Age of first use. I was at extremely high risk. For those of you who saw me in the tank, I'm really young. Yes? Yep. Nope. We're talking family history. So if you have a history of addiction in your family, your uncle that they never see has addiction problems, a cousin who has addiction problems, you are more prone in your genetic makeup. It's just there's a family history, genetic profile. There is the other side too, and we'll talk about that as well. Age of first use, mental health. Mental health is really important, so having good mental health is really good for them, but having poor mental health is a risk factor. And a history of trauma. If things have happened to them, big things have happened to their lives that have been really scary, it can increase the risk of substance abuse. Resilience, we talked about resilience already, and resilience is really important. And it is about being able to cope with those positive stresses that are in your life. So when I have a test, it's a positive stress, and I need to be able to cope with that. When I have negative stresses in my life, I need to be able to cope with that too, and I need the adults to help me with those tolerable stresses, like, when I break up with my girlfriend, I need my mom to step in and say it's okay. When my dog dies, I need someone to help me. I need little pushes on those tolerable stresses. Connecting with others, a sense of value, and a sense of mattering. And I'm pressed for time, so I'm going to leave you with this. And this is Oprah about the importance of mattering.
I can tell you that every single person I've ever talked to, whether they were victims of violence or the person who committed the violence, whether they were celebrities or whether they were going through difficult times in their life, when I finished the interview, almost to a person, at some point, one would lean into me and say, "Was that okay? Was that okay? Was I all right?" Even Beyonce and all her Beyonce-ness. At the end of a performance where she was as Beyonce as you could get, leaned in and said, "Was that okay?" And what I learned in all those thousands of interviews is that there's a common denominator in the human experience that we all share. We all want to know that what we do and what we say and who we are matters. We want to be validated. Every single person, in every single confrontation, every single encounter that you have, whether it's with the guy at the supermarket or in the toll booth or your boss or your children, every argument is really about, do you see me? Do you see me? Does what I say mean anything to you? Do I matter to you?
Quickly, because I'm going to let some other people talk because I've done a lot of talking. Really key things, tips, role model responsible substance use in your home. Don't buy the socks that says, "If you can read my socks, get me a beer." Not responsible behavior, but we need to realize that. Keep your alcohol and cannabis, if you have cannabis, locked in a cabinet. Delay the introduction of alcohol and cannabis to youth as long as you possibly can. So 25 is a real good, steep goal, but delay, delay, delay. Have clear rules and boundaries regarding substance use and communicate those with your kids. Stay involved with your kids' life as you go along. So it's really easy to be involved when you walk and hold their hand across the street. It's much more difficult when they're 19. Stay involved, continue to communicate with them. One of the things they will say, have a regular dinner, a sit-down dinner with your children 3 times a week. Reduces the chance of substance use and abuse. Last message is delay, delay, delay. Delay use as long as you can. You get them to a point where at 25, if they've never used and you offer them a cigarette, they're going to say, "I don't want a cigarette." You offer them a bottle of beer, they'll probably not want it because they'll not be interested. And that, for me, is probably a place I wouldn't mind people being at, because alcohol has such a big effect on our society. And it's not a good effect, it's negative. It costs us a lot. So I'm going to leave you with that. I did leave you, I provided a few things on the tables, and I will answer one question. Okay, I can answer questions. Okay. All right, go ahead. Yeah, there's a huge correlation between alcohol use and sexual assault. It's almost directly linked. Alcohol is almost always involved in some form of sexual assault by either the victim or the victim and the perpetrator. So alcohol is involved heavily. It is part of the discussion. The health curriculum is, this is the problem with the health curriculum. The health curriculum is a 2-week curriculum in grade 9 where they start to talk about those things. Also, they talk about healthy living and mental health and a number of other components. So when you get to is that talked about? It's attempted to talk about, but it's not touched on enough. It needs to be talked about more, and that's where we need adults to talk about it, the parents as well, to take part in those discussions.
And can we give a round of applause for Dan? That's yours there. Okay, and we would just like the last bit of our evening, and then we're just going to have our co-chairs do a thank you before you go, is to introduce two schools. They presented at one of our board meetings, and they were sharing some of the things that they do in their school to increase engagement with their parents and their families. So I'm going to turn it over to Jill, as the principal at William Dunbar.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, and good evening. I know you've been here for a little while, so we'll be quick. I'm the principal at William Dunbar. This is Tanya Hawthorne. She's their vice principal, and we've worked very hard at our school to involve our parents in the strategic plan for the board and in our school improvement planning. And so we just wanted to share with you some of the things that we've done. Superintendent Mundy was so kind as to ask us to do that. So you all know, because you're all parents and you have kids in schools, that schools are living organisms. They're not just institutions and they're not buildings. They're living organisms that are made up of many, many moving parts. And those moving parts need to work together in order to be truly effective. So in schools, what we're moving together to be effective about is student achievement and student success. So improving student achievement is the aim of all the stakeholders. So our job, working together with our school community council, is to work towards that. At William Dunbar, we are proud of the team approach and the dedication to improving student achievement that we take. And to that end, we align all of those moving parts and our stakeholder groups, that is parents, teachers and staff, non-teaching staff, students, and members of our community to that approach. So you can see some of our SIPSAW goals are there, and we very clearly align them with the strategic aims, the strategic priorities of the Durham District School Board. So this makes our SCC an active participant both in our school planning, so they can see the alignment, and in the board planning as well, and that helps to make the dialogue a lot more effective. So rather than have me talk about it, we've been joined tonight by our SCC co-chairs, because I know they're who you want to hear from. So Katie Capilano and Shannon Belmore are our co-chairs, and they're here tonight to talk to you a little bit about how they support this plan.
That's great. Thank you, Jill. So yes, I'm Katie, and we just thought we'd share a couple of things about how we've managed the SCC while we've been in charge and what we've found has worked and how we've connected in with some of the stuff Jill's talked about. So as members of SCCs, we know a lot of what we do is fundraising, and typically I think that's been the model a lot of SCCs have used, and certainly that's still a very active part of what we do. But what we wanted to do is be a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more strategic with how we're fundraising and what we're fundraising for, which is always a bit of a challenge. So traditionally, when we've been involved in the past, it was fundraise like crazy and then start figuring out what to do and what to buy, and it was always very valuable, but we wanted to make it a little bit more aligned with what the school was trying to do, what these 6 strategic priorities were. So working alongside with Tanya and Jill, we were able to develop a bit of this is one example of how we have mapped out some of the priority items that we were trying to do some fundraising for, so that there's a bit more thoughtfulness and people understand what we're trying to buy for, and we can also prioritize using this kind of a model that figures out what the priorities are at that given moment to release some of the funds a little bit quicker. So as you're doing fundraising through the year, we moved into a space where in the fall we were able to release a lot more money faster because we knew going in what our priorities were and how we were going to manage that. So that's worked really well for us in a way that we can really support these goals and support that framework. The next thing that we wanted to touch upon is the fact that while fundraising is important and while fundraising is something we're always going to be doing, we've really worked hard to move away from that being the core of what we do and find ways to engage parents that really stretch beyond that. So finding ways to engage what the parents are passionate about, what the parents like to do. So we had one parent very keen on doing Walk to School Wednesdays, and that has been a raging success at our school. She really led with it, and we found ways as an SCC to support that. with financial, but also just people getting involved, and it's a very healthy activity, and the kids loved it, so it hit a lot of those targets, and it was very parent-driven. So we wanted to move away from everything we're engaging the parents to do being strictly about fundraising and those events to things that they want to bring that support health and well-being, and in many ways cultural. We had Tamil History Month last year was actually run by one of our school parents. She brought in a lot of the programming and information and really led a lot of those modules, and we supported her activities with that. We incorporated STEM last year into our fun fair and made that the focus of it. So while it traditionally was just fun, and it still was, it had a little bit more of a learning base to it because of the STEM component. And this year we've actually been working alongside many other schools in Pickering for the program application to bring in a joint cultural and well-being initiative that goes beyond just our school. So one of the things is, how can we reach out into the community? How can we extend beyond just our William Dunbar walls and make sure people feel that they can get a lot of value out of just being a part of this community through us? So it's a bit of a journey. We have an active SCC, and we're very fortunate for that, but the more you extend, we found, the more people want to be involved and feel included in some of those activities, and that all aligns with those 6 strategic priorities very nicely. So that's worked well for us, and I'm going to pass it over to Shannon to talk a little bit about some other stuff.
So one of the things that we've engaged as well with our community is obviously the students. I mean, we're there for the kids, and so it's been important to us to have different student groups come and present to us at our SCC meetings. Sometimes it's just to let us know what initiatives they're taking part in, and other times it's to ask for our assistance, either to get the word out, like battery return, programs, or whether they need some funding to help support one of the things that's an initiative to them, like the Buddy Bench. While we maybe help financially support it, it's really their initiative, and they've taken a big leadership role with it. So it's one of the ways that we get to really engage with the students themselves and not be a separate entity, which is really important to us. The other big challenge that we have is really how do we reach out to that community? So we always have a certain core group of parents, and you'll experience that yourselves, that are always at the meetings and are the ones that are involved. But how do we reach out to all the rest of the community and get their input and find out what's important to them? And so we've tried really hard over the last 2 years that we've been co-chairing the SCC to create Facebook groups, to get a much larger range of people with SCC, with emails, but even just to be present at events. So welcome to kindergarten nights, and talk to parents that are just coming to the school about what it is we do outside of fundraising, because everyone just thinks that's all we do. And so really about getting that engagement, talking about the kind of things that we will have at our meetings that are much more about knowledge and learning about how we can interact better with our children and our school community. So it's been one of our big initiatives to try to reach out to the community is actually a 4-year goal of raising funds to have an electronic sign put out in front of the school to help reach the entire community, not just the ones who are in the school seeing posters and signs, but the people driving by who may want to get involved with what we're doing. So that's one of our bigger initiatives and a way to reach out to the community as a whole.
So what we're really proud of our SCC are sort of 2 things. One has been the really strategic alignment they've chosen to take around those 6 strategic priorities, and really in tight consultation with us, our teacher representatives, our student leaders, and administration, around aligning really tightly with those 6 priorities so everything makes sense and is transparent. But then along with that broad to try and increase the scope of how people. They've really made it clear they're more than a fundraising group, although they're very good at that. And they've really made it, they've really tried to outreach to bring more community involvement in than just the people who are able to show up, in our case, on Thursday nights once a month. So they've done a really good job of narrowing their focus to really align tightly with what we're doing, and broadening their outreach to the community and the community's perception of what an SCC can do for a school. And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Pierre Elliott Trudeau and Lynn Malandrino, the principal. The forward arrow does work on that?
Click her way, yeah.
I don't touch technology. So in the interest of time, but also in alignment with the biggest shift in our SCC over the past 5 years, we have moved from a very top-down, school asks for stuff, SCC fundraises like mad, school says thank you, to pretty much a completely SCC parent community-driven, this is what our kids want, this is what we want for our kids, school figure out how to make it work. So on that note, I'm going to stop talking and let Tanya Cochran, our SCC chair, talk to you about how she and her team have made that happen.
Thank you, Lynn. And I know we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to skip over a few things that and just kind of focus on some of the important things. One of the things that was really important to us is having more representation at our SCC meetings and events. And to make that happen, we tried to be a lot more inclusive in our meetings, try and get the word out more about them. Something as simple as a structured agenda, formal minutes, those go a long way in making people feel welcome and that their time is valued. Keeping on task, we even have someone who times our agenda items so that we're not there for 3 hours and people leave and say, what did we talk about other than what everyone's doing on Friday night? So those kinds of things are small changes that we made, but they go a long way in making people feel valued and welcome at our meetings. Because our participation started to grow, we were finding that we were in need of something called subcommittees. And so that was an opportunity for a lot of work to get done outside of the SCC meetings, a lot of the grunt work, if you will, very specific things that would bog down our regular agenda at the SCC. And so the SCC meetings became updates. Where are we? Where are we going? What kinds of things should we be looking ahead to? Okay. One of the most important things we did a couple years ago, and we're actually probably due for it again, was we did an SCC survey. So we asked the parents, what do you think the SCC does? What do you think they do a good job at? What kinds of things do you think could be changed, or what kinds of ideas do you have for the SCC? We were surprised at the response. Usually surveys are very, very low participation if anyone has ever done one, but we had a really good return. And we had some fantastic ideas, and that has kind of been a guideline for us in all of our different initiatives. So when we're at a meeting and we're talking about what should we be doing, we were using the survey as a way to kind of guide what the SCC was doing. And so we were getting that feedback from the parents, from the community, and using that to figure out what kinds of projects we should be doing. We moved away from fundraising as Dunbar. I mean, we still do fundraising, we have to, but we are focusing our events more so on inclusive things that everyone can participate in. So instead of having a fun fair that was a fundraiser, we now have a fun fest that is free. Face painting is free. Airbrush tattoos is free. Balloon twisting is free. The only thing you have to pay for, and it's optional of course, is your food. So those kinds of things, those events, are now becoming an opportunity for the community to get involved more often. We are also trying to put together activities and purchase items that the community wants. As Lynn said, the parents and families are guiding where those funds go. So outdoor space was really important to our families. It's very hard with a school of almost 800 children in the footprint. You all have similar challenges to improve that outdoor space for all those kids. So we had a sunshade in partnership with our daycare provider installed in order to provide kindergarten safe shade space for our kindergartens, as well as 2 benches. You can see in the picture there, 2 kids sitting on the bench. We had 2 benches like that, not only to protect our poor little trees that were being trampled, but also giving the kids an opportunity to have a spot where they could sit and have a bit of a timeout if they needed it. So those kinds of things we were getting from the survey and from the parents. We also try to focus our projects on things that the whole school will benefit from. So we really steer our projects towards things that a large number of the students are going to get benefit from, and also things that are going to be reusable, things that can be a part of the school for a long period of time. So an example of that is our folk dancing t-shirts. Grade 3s and 4s don't have a lot of clubs or teams that they can participate in. This is one of their big ones where everyone is welcome, and we wanted them to feel really special, and so that was one of the projects that we worked on. So those are just some different examples of what we do at Trudeau, and that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you all. That was a great presentation and very informative. Now, please take a moment. On your tables, you will find some surveys. Will you please take a moment and fill out those surveys for us? You can access them through a link that is provided also with their hard copy as well. So you have the hard copy in front of you, and you could also access that through the website.
Thank you for coming tonight. We hope you enjoyed the evening. We look forward to seeing everyone at our Free Parents as Partners Symposium Vision 2020. See it, achieve it with keynote Dr. Evan Joseph on Saturday, April 4th. Registration will be open on March 4th. Once again, thank you and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.